Welcome to our first Y4S Climate Talks, and we're very happy to convene today to discuss why it matters for the UAE to host COP28 and what opportunities this can present for youth in the region and beyond to tackle climate challenges.
Hello everyone, thank you for having us today and for having this conversation with us today. I think first of all, I'm very proud to have recently heard the news that the UAE has won to bid COP28. Now, COP in general is a very important aspect to have in terms of solving the climate crisis. Why? Because currently the climate issue is an issue that is not only affecting several countries, it is affecting us all over the world. So having COP is like having a lighthouse or a platform where different countries can come and collaborate, cooperate, and have all of their voices on a single table for us to be able to effectively organize our thoughts and gather them together, because I think having them at one place at the same time is going to be very effective in us trying to understand the situation, what is going on in different places. So I think it's very important in that aspect for us to be able to have a more holistic view and perspective of things, to be able to draft certain strategies or plans or a vision that can help not only a single country or a single region, but initiatives that help globally on a whole. So that's, I think, one of the most important things from my perspective about COP.
Talking of COP in general, we'll also mention one thing, that this is actually a combination of the scientific conference and the political forum, where also the representative of the business are invited. And that's why the main idea of COP, in my opinion, is in general, is the formation of the new frameworks for the complex cooperation between different sides of the aspect, where scientists, business, and government, they actually learn how to work with each other on solving that question. And if answering your question, this is exactly what young people can do, is to offer a new way of horizontal communication between the different spheres of fighting climate change and other issues in the society, since our generation is much more involved in this horizontal cooperation right now due to the fact that we grew up with the digital technologies, and we are more free in this context of addressing other people due to the professional matters. The fact that we now are talking about this is actually one of the examples of what I'm talking about. The people with a different background are still able to find the common ground more easily.
My contextual understanding of the current state of basically the convention of parties that's happening right now, we're seeing that there's a lot of missing stakeholders that are being put into the front line of basically creating these important, rather than call to action, but actually creating implementations in these actions. And obviously the youth, what they've done so far is that they only infantilized the activism part of it, but they have not infantilized the implementation part of it, which is the idea that they bring the youth to bring out the voice of urgency rather than the voice of actual implementation. And it's because what the youth do is that they remove the interest of larger corporations or fossil fuel industries or people that are running the fossil fuel initially. What the youth do is that they try to remove that kind of interest because they are calling more to an initial implementation. But what my perspective is that I'm seeing that the youth are there, they are calling to action, they are causing an impact. However, when it comes to from point B to C, we pause there and we don't actually implement it. And another thing is that we are talking about the future generations a lot, but we do forget that there are current populations right now that are already facing the climate impact. And it's people that live in the global south, people that have a voice that is way more important and way more harder to actually implement these changes towards them. And the youth are only trying to call an urgency towards that. And we are calling to our future, but then there is a present to take into account as well.
I really love the points that Ashraq brought up. And I think, in light of like the current events and what has been happening these couple of weeks, I think, it's true that youth activism has kind of, as harsh as it may seem, been used kind of just like a PR stunt, but we can't really see how the youth involvement is actually being used to, as Ashraf said, move from point B to point C. And I think what's important to realize is, first of all, understanding the connection, as Alexander mentioned, the connection between the science and the politics. And I think the youth can also bridge that gap. As you know, we're currently, let's say, researching latest technologies and renewable energy technologies, for example, or, we can, a lot of youth have various backgrounds in, let's say, climate change, science, all that technical details. So I think we can also bridge that gap between the science and the politics, because a lot of times we see politics opposing technological advancements. And in order to overcome these obstacles, I think the youth should have a voice in that aspect as well, and not only in activism, but in also bridging the gap between science and politics.
It's not leaning towards any of them directly. Like, it's not obvious that one is more than the other. It can be both. But I'd say from a logistical perspective, it'd be a lot easier for the youth nowadays to be involved in the innovation side, technological side, only because it's exponentially improving. And I think that a lot of the youth is drifting towards that. And because of politics and governmental policies, having youth involved in that and implementing them, as a lot of my colleagues mentioned, it's not really actually being applied. But yet again, I think the youth can be involved in both immensely. And I think the key here is that the youth, more than any other generation, can turn challenges into opportunities, in my opinion. And it's not necessarily that they're giving the opportunities, it's that they create the opportunities for themselves through networking, through showing off what they have in terms of skills and in terms of knowledge. And I think having COP28 in 2023 in the UAE, I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think the youth will be heavily involved.
In my perspective, I mean, I've heard a lot of people talking about how, the youth should have voice within political policy making, weight in political scenarios. But to be frank, the political leaders do have a lot of skepticism with the youth, and this cause doesn't come without an effect. A lot of youth leaders are often rash. It can be seen in one way or other. Youth these days absorb the very little they see and think that is the very way they have to proceed. I have been to different events and I can see some that are mature enough to understand the broader picture, but some who limit themselves to this narrow picture and go ahead enforcing it. One thing that I genuinely believe the youth has to develop, at least within the next couple of years, in order to become sustainability leaders, is that they need to have the ability to listen. The ability to listen and absorb what's around them, because it's the youth that has this capability to absorb. It's scientifically proven, it's written, it's there. So if we have this capability, we got to use it to the fullest and understand this broader spectrum. I mean, we could be idealistic or say, you know what, this isn't good. Can we just ban it? Why plastic here? But when it comes down to the economy, it's a lot more integrated. You can't just simply remove one thing or the other. So being idealistic is good in a sense, but it needs to be more practical. So we need to know what are the possibilities out there. And I think Y4S is one such platform, because before I came to Y4S, I didn't know what light pollution was. It was during an expo visit that I even came to know that such a concept ever existed. So for me, it's a learning experience at each phase, and I believe it's the same for others as well. So it's one thing that I believe everyone has to focus on, at least absorb, reflect, and then voice out your opinions. And the next thing is that there are a lot of disasters coming. And I think we have been hearing about this one after another, about the climate change. And as of now, the stats say that there's around a 1.5 degree increase in climate change, and it's nearing 3 degrees. It's a disaster, more or less. And the youth are working on it, but I believe we need to greatly involve the numbers, expand them, and perhaps actively come together at conferences such as COP26. These are all great opportunities, more than sharing opinions with political leaders and policy making. It's a great opportunity for the youth themselves to learn from political figures and exchange information. And this exchanging can play a huge role in helping the youth around to combat such issues.
I do believe the youth may actually have a lot more knowledge than others, just because they're the ones who will be experiencing the outcomes of climate change in 20, 30 years. They're the ones who will be encountering this. And there's a lot of opportunities for youth to be able to brainstorm some ideas, just like the session that we're in right now. I think the youth are capable of finding resolutions, and COP28 will be an excellent opportunity for them to demonstrate their skills and ways to fight climate change.